Hey everybody, this is Rust Metro Game Core. Today we're going to take a look at the Backbone Pro. So this is an updated version of the old Backbone 1 controller. The first Backbone 1 came out in 2021 and they've made a bunch of iterations since then. And in this video we'll talk about all of the updates they've done with this new Pro model. And even though it kind of looks like the older controller, it has been completely retooled. Every single control feels different and better. They've also changed out its connectivity, so in addition to being a USB-C telescopic controller, it also works via Bluetooth, so you can connect this to just about anything. Either way, my goal in this video is to see whether or not the $170 price tag of the Backbone Pro justifies it over something cheaper like the Backbone for $100 or even other cheaper options as well. And even though this is just a controller review, we've got a lot to unpack, so grab a snack and drink. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's start by talking about the original Backbone 1, which I got right when it first released back in 2021. And this was one of the very first telescopic controllers that I ever used, and I loved just how ergonomic and lightweight it was. It was also one of the first telescopic controllers that had analog triggers, and so I always appreciated that. However, there were some things I didn't like about it, including the face buttons, which I found were too clicky and loud and a little bit stiff. Also, because this thing was so slim, you had to take your phone out of its case in order to put it inside, so that was always a nuisance. In addition, I never really liked the plastic texture. You could see just how beat up it got over time. It used to get kind of hot and sweaty and had a weird soft rubbery feel to it. And this controller did try to iterate over the years, so they initially had just a lightning port, so it was only going to be for old school iPhones, but then later they released a USB-C version which can be used on Android as well as newer iPhones. They also came out with different versions. For example, this is the PlayStation 1 with the original glyphs, and it was actually an official release with Sony. They also did one for like Death Stranding and I think for Post Malone. I don't have those, but yes, they've made different colors and stuff, but the controller itself has remained essentially the same. And so I was very excited to hear about this new Pro model. In fact, they reached out to me and overnighted this to me the other day. And so I've had a couple days to mess around with it, and it's kind of exciting to be so close to a new launch like this. And as a quick disclaimer here with all my reviews, I'm not being paid for any of this stuff, and all opinions are my own, and they're not seeing this video ahead of time. And so first question I had with this controller is what separates it from the Backbone 1? How does it justify an additional $70 price increase? And like I mentioned, number one here is the fact that it has dual connectivity. So in addition to being a USB-C controller, it also just works via Bluetooth. It has a Bluetooth pairing button right here on the bottom. And so essentially the idea here is that this can be used in multiple different ways. Number one, yes, you can just plug it into your phone and use it like that. But then also if you just wanted to use it as a Bluetooth controller, say with your PC or a tablet, all that is going to work as well. And as far as I know, this is the first telescopic controller I've seen that has a direct input as well as Bluetooth at the same time. Usually you have to pick one or the other. Let's take the two GameSir controllers as an example. So these are some of my favorite telescopic controllers on the market. They're about $80 each. We've got a USB-C version as well as a Bluetooth version. And so the idea is that the Backbone can kind of be a little bit of both in that you can use it for direct input, but then also that Bluetooth connectivity. And so my first reaction when looking at that price point and the features is that, yeah, they're kind of trying to be both, where you don't have to decide one or the other, or you don't have to own two different controllers. We'll talk more about the features of these two compared to the Backbone later in the video, but for now, I want to talk about the hardware that we have with the new Backbone Pro. And like I mentioned in the intro, this one kind of looks like the old one, but it has been completely retooled. Everything feels just a little bit different. In fact, there are so many changes to this thing, it's really hard to know where to start. Let's start with just kind of the overall feel of it. And the first thing you'll notice is that the grips are a lot bigger. In fact, it's a night and day difference between the two. The new grips are a lot more rounded and they're flared out in all the right ways, right here near the bottom as well as out a little bit. And so it is super comfortable to hold. I really do like how rounded it is all along here. It kind of feels like holding onto a cylinder, almost like two little baguettes that are on the side of your controller. The original Backbone always had nice ergonomics. It was rounded in all the right places as well, but it does feel a little bit smaller and more compact. With the new Backbone Pro, it kind of feels like holding a full console controller instead, even though it is not that much bigger. And so I think they did a good job in just the overall weight and feel of this controller. It's about 200 grams, by the way, so about 2/3 the weight of an Xbox controller. Now, in addition to just the overall grip and feel of ergonomics, I think there are some other improvements as well. Number one being that it feels more sturdy than before. It's still, a telescopic controller, so it gives a little bit of wiggle room, but not that much. With the original one, I feel like I could bend bent it quite a bit, and so I never really felt like this was a sturdy controller, all things considered. And so this one feels like it's going to last a lot longer in terms of just overall sturdiness. It also has a deeper well on each of the sides, and so you can use a phone with a case now, and even with a camera bump, it really doesn't affect it either. And so I found that just with my iPhone and regular case, I've had no problem connecting. They've also really improved the plastics. You can see that it now has a slight bumpy grippiness to it, and the plastic itself feels kind of soft, but then also is a hard plastic. And so I feel like this is kind of the best of both worlds. They've also added some of that grippiness to the triggers, and the front plastic also feels a lot better. Like it's not getting smudgy as much as it was previously. So in just the overall look and feel, yeah, this does feel like a pro level improvement over the original. And that makes sense. It's been 4 years since the first controller came out. Now let's talk about the controls and buttons and whatnot. And according to the company, they went through 9,000 part iterations over the past 4 years in making this controller. Let's start with these analog sticks, and these are essentially full-sized analog sticks, as you can see. The original controller sticks kind of feel like on the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con, where they just kind of flop to one side as opposed to actually moving around. Again, at the time that was fine because that's how basically all these small sticks were, but now we've got something that's actually full-sized and it feels great. And so we do have a huge range of motion, and I think they're at a really excellent height as well. And so yeah, it feels a bit like using a regular console controller. And these sticks do feel nice and responsive, like I can move them wherever I would like, within the inner circle or the outer circle, no cardinal snapping or anything else like that. I also think that they are positioned well, so when playing a dual stick game, they feel very natural to hold. These sticks themselves are not super premium feeling. For example, it doesn't have like a metal ring around the stick or anything else that you would find in more modern controllers. It's also just using the same standard Alps potentiometer that you would find in like a DualSense controller or an Xbox Series controller. So just that standard console feel as opposed to Hall effect or TMR. And that's my first criticism of this controller, in that, it's just using an older stick technology compared to some of the newer stuff, but they're charging a premium price point for it. For $170, I would expect in a controller today to use Hall effect or TMR technology. So who knows when it comes to stick drift over time, but at least as it stands right now, the sticks feel good, but I feel like they could be better at $170. Now let's talk about the D-pad. So this one has been retooled as well. It's got the same kind of overall design to it, but the D-pad itself feels very different. Number one, it now has a glossy texture to it compared to the more matte texture of the previous one, so it's very easy to identify it as you're playing. It also has a little line at the up arrow. I'm not really sure what that's used for, but yeah, you can see it just kind of stands out there. Now the feel of the D-pad is somewhat similar to the original one, but improved. It is a rubber membrane connection, so it has a bit of an old school feel to it, but the D-pad itself is sloped on the edges, and so the center part is kind of like a little bit of a concave dip. And this makes it really easy with your thumb to find each of the directions because it just kind of glides to each of them. In addition, having those flared edges makes the pivot really easy to do as well. So this feels like a nice old school D-pad. I really like it. In terms of functionality, it also passes both of my standard tests. So number one is going to be the contra test. So here I'm looking to see how sensitive the D-pad is. I like to press down on the D-pad, then rock it left and right. And if I slightly rock it, then the character will not move. But if I try to push it all the way, then the character will move. And that is a good middle ground when it comes to D-pads for me. That means that if I need to press down without pressing the other sides, I can definitely do that. But if I need to pivot over to one of the sides, I can do that as well. So this D-pad easily passes the contra test. It's probably one of the better rubber membrane D-pads I've used before. By that same token, it does a really good job when I'm playing a game where I want to hit a diagonal, like with a Street Fighter style fighting game. And so here, when doing my quarter circle moves, it is very easy to do. I grew up playing Street Fighter 2 on a Super Nintendo controller, and this feels very natural for me. And so yes, this passes my Contra and Street Fighter test. It is Hadoukenable and Shoryukenable. Some other things I like about the D-pad is that it has quite a bit of travel to it, more so than the previous one, but also has a nice amount of resistance too. So yeah, overall a very good D-pad here. Also on the left side, we've got our select and screen capture buttons. Then on the right side, we've got a backbone button and then also our start button. And this layout is the same as it was on the original controller. It's a little bit weird to have to reach down to press select and start, but other than that, I think the placement is just fine. Now let's talk about these face buttons. So they have a glossy texture to them as well, and the labels are inset inside of the button. It looks really nice and sharp. And this time around, the buttons are also rubber membrane, so they are very similar to the D-pad just in terms of overall feel. They also have a nice tactile feel to them without being super loud, and so they are not silent, but they're very close to being it, especially compared to the original controller. And so overall, I think these buttons are very good. They are a little bit small, which is kind of standard with these smaller controllers, but they feel almost identical to the D-pad, so I really like the fact that they are very similar. My only complaint about the face buttons has nothing to do with the buttons themselves, but the placement of the right analog stick. So I found that when playing certain games, needing to press the A button, that the right analog stick kind of gets in my way. And a lot of this has to do with the design layout of the controller itself, where these two are just kind of in a little bit of conflict. A good example here is when trying to play Super Mario World. So in this game, you're going to press the X button to run and then the A button at the same time. So you kind of hold your thumb like this and then press the A button. And no matter what, as I'm using it, my thumb is definitely pressing against the stick, and that gets a little bit annoying. Like, it feels like it's kind of getting in my way. And so if you are going to be playing a game that relies on the A button, for example, a platforming game, this is a little bit off. It feels like the controls are more designed for something like, Fortnite or Call of Duty, where you're mostly going to be using the analog sticks and then the face buttons and D-pad on occasion. When playing a retro game like this, it definitely feels like a compromised experience, and I think there are better controls out there for this type of controller scheme. And unfortunately, these sticks don't pop out or anything, so it's not a matter of just popping them out while you're playing these types of games. This stick is just going to get in your way. And it is kind of a bummer because this D-pad is so good for retro gaming that I feel like I want to play retro games on this, but the stick is something that gives me a little bit of pause. Now let's talk about these shoulders and triggers. So these shoulder buttons are nice and soft and clicky, so it feels like they're probably using a micro switch but a lot of rubber padding, and so it's a very easy button to press down on at all angles and is not very loud. So overall, I think it's a really excellent fit. And the analog triggers are largely the same as they were on the original backbone, although they do feel a little bit more resistant. So there's not a ton of travel here with the trigger, but it is still an analog input. And like I mentioned, it has the same ribbing on the back as it does on the trigger, and so it has a nice amount of grippiness as well. So I think this is a pretty good fit. For a lot of games like first-person shooters, Call of Duty and whatnot, those you don't want to have a long amount of travel because you want to be able to fire quickly, and so this is kind of helpful in that regard. But then also it's nice that it is analog input, so that is going to work great for things like racing games too. And so when it comes to the controls themselves, I have very minor complaints about the fact that the right analog stick can get in your way of certain gameplay types, and then also these sticks themselves could probably have been a better technology. But otherwise, it feels like the Backbone Pro is an upgrade in every single way over the original Backbone 1. Now, also on the back, we've got two new buttons, and these can be programmed within their software. The buttons themselves barely stick out from the shell, so they're pretty easy to forget about, and they are clicky but don't take a ton of force and are not very loud. I will say the placement of them is a little bit weird. It's basically for your ring finger, and I rarely use my ring fingers when playing a game, but they are there if you want them. And the way this works is if you go into the settings up here, you have controller profiles. And so if we go into the settings right here, you can see I've already got one set up that has my name on it. And within here, there's a buttons assignment option. So here, you can actually assign any of your buttons to whatever you would like. So if you want to swap out like your A, B, X, Y, or have your L3 act as your B button, you can do all that stuff here. And then of course for your two back buttons, this is where you assign them. So you can see that I have this one assigned to X and this to A, and it's very easy to set up. You just basically choose whatever button you would like, and you press and hold it, and then that will assign it. So the idea here is that I have this back button as my X button. So that's kind of my reload button when playing a first-person shooter. And same thing with my A button, this is my jump button. So if I ever am playing something like Call of Duty, those are the controls that I will use. But like I said, the overall placement of these buttons makes them pretty easy to forget about if you don't plan on using them. And even though I have tested a bunch of those games on this controller, I just keep forgetting that they're there, and so I rarely will use them. Now on the bottom, we've got a couple other options. So on the left side, we've got our Bluetooth pairing button, and then also a 3.5mm headphone jack. And on the right side, we have a USB-C port. So this can be used to both charge the controller itself, since it is a Bluetooth controller and has its own battery. And so in that case, you just plug it in while the controller is turned off, and it'll charge. It'll actually glow a little bit of red right here around the backbone button. But it is also worth noting that it can do pass-through charging as well. So it's charging right here, and you can see that my phone is actually working. And so the way this works is what they call parallel charging. So it'll do pass-through charging to charge the phone, but it will also trickle charge the controller itself when it needs it. And so the primary focus is charging the phone itself, but it will charge the controller too. And so it's kind of a seamless experience. You think about, when you plug this in, usually it's because your battery is low on the phone, but it's nice that it also charges the controller too. And so you don't really have to think about the batteries on the controller. If we go back into the settings in the Backbone app, it'll actually show you the battery charges for each. And so right now it's not charging the controller, only the phone. But, if this would dip down, say below 85% or something, then it would charge the controller a little bit as well. So I do like the fact that we have pass-through charging and that it's kind of intelligent in knowing which one to charge first. But one feature I would have loved to have seen with this USB-C port is video out. If you've got something like AR glasses, or even if you just wanted to plug this into an external monitor, that would have been great as well. For example, if this was your primary gaming device, you wanted to play something like PSP or maybe Hades, but you wanted to play it on a TV, you could just do that instead. Now, there are obviously workarounds for it. For example, with an iPhone, I could just use AirPlay over to like an Apple TV, things like that, but I'd much rather have something hardwired. As far as I know, right now, there are no telescopic controllers with video out. There's one in the works from 8BitDo and Vitchur, but it's part of a package deal. It's like $480. So again, I think that would have been another cool premium feature to have on a premium $170 controller. So now let's talk about connectivity options. So I've got my iPhone right here, but obviously I could be using an Android phone as well. And as you can see, I do have a case on here. This is just like a generic, somewhat thin case on Amazon. And so the way this will work with, iPhone 15 and above that have USB-C, you would just open this up and then put it right in. And so even with the case installed, yes, I can use this controller, and it doesn't get in the way of my camera bump either. Like, they've accounted for that as well. Now, bear in mind, this is a 15 Pro, so it's not like the Max model or the Plus or whatever they call them these days. And so with a bigger phone, it might have a bigger camera bump, but it feels like there's a little bit of wiggle room here. So I expect that as camera bumps get bigger, this will still work. Either way, now that I'm connected, I can just open up, one of my Emulator apps or whatever, and it will immediately detect my controller. So you can see here, I can move around. And so here I am just immediately playing PSP at a 4x resolution here on the PSP app within the App Store. So this is kind of crazy that I can do this on an iPhone right now. And I didn't have to do anything in terms of just configuration or whatnot. Like, it just all picked up on the controller and everything is working nicely. And this will work with just about any mobile game that has built-in controller support. So something like Hades, yeah, on the iPhone, it works great. And one thing I would recommend doing when looking for new games on the iPhone App Store is that there's a little section right here that'll say whether or not it's controller supported. And so that's really handy to know which games you can download that'll work with this controller right out of the box. And so this is probably going to be the primary way that most people will use the Backbone Pro, is that they're going to just connect it to their phone via USB-C, and then they can use that to play, mobile games or even emulators. And so this essentially can turn your phone into a mobile gaming console without having to buy a dedicated handheld like you often find on this channel. Now, of course, there's good and bad with this setup. It doesn't really feel like a dedicated handheld device, but it is nice that you don't have to buy anything new other than the controller itself. And it is nice to have pass-through charging if you want it. Now, one thing worth noting is that this controller is definitely designed with a phone in mind and not a tablet, because even a small tablet like this one right here does not fit. In fact, you can see there's quite a distance right here that it would have to go in order to meet it. And so if you are specifically looking for a tablet controller, then I don't think this is going to be a good fit. It's going to fit like those bigger phones, but that's about it. So if you have something like an 8-inch tablet like this, or, an iPad mini, I don't think they're going to work with this controller unless you wanted to modify it. And I would not recommend doing that. And that's where these bigger controllers will come into play, like the Gamester G8 Plus, which has plenty of room for a tablet. Same thing with the Razer Kishi Ultra. This one gets very big. So there are ways to play with a tablet, either through Bluetooth or through USB-C, but it's not going to be with the Backbone 1. It's going to be with one of these controllers. And you can see that these are a lot bigger than the Backbone, so that's one of the concessions that you have to make with a more compact design like this. However, there are still ways to connect this to a tablet. Even if it doesn't fit inside, this is a Bluetooth controller as well. So the way you do this is just press and hold the Bluetooth pairing button, and you wait until this button down here starts to flash. You can see it right here around the Backbone logo. Once you get that flashing, just go into your Bluetooth settings and then pair it with your Backbone Pro. And so now my big ol' iPad Pro is connected via Bluetooth. And so I can connect into, like, say, for example, RetroArch, and it's all working great. And so this is a nice way to be able to play with the same controller on different platforms, including a tablet. It's not as seamless as being able to obviously put it inside of the controller, but it's nice that I don't have to change out controllers to play on a different platform like this. And in terms of latency, this does feel good. Now, I'm not doing any specific latency tests. I'm not sure what the polling rate here is via Bluetooth, but yeah, I think it feels pretty good. And admittedly, it is a little bit weird to use something like a telescopic controller that's not actually connected to a screen. So it is a little bit odd just to kind of hold it like this and use it as a Bluetooth controller, but it is nice that you wouldn't have to buy an additional controller to use this type of functionality. And so I think that's probably what they were going for here, is the idea of using one controller in multiple different situations. And I have to say that after a few minutes of thinking that it was a little bit silly to use this as a Bluetooth controller, I actually started to enjoy it even more. And part of that has to do with the fact that this is a relatively wide controller. And so it feels like my shoulders and elbows have a lot of room to work with in terms of just their placement, as opposed to like a smaller controller. And so it actually is quite comfortable compared to just a standard controller with these full-size sticks and everything else. And so I would not say that it's as good as using like a PlayStation or an Xbox controller, but it is nice that we have this option and it's more comfortable than I thought it would be. It's one of those things where I just didn't want to look down and look at my hands while I was playing because it was a little bit silly to hold a telescopic controller like this. Now, one thing worth noting when using it in Bluetooth mode like this is that the controller itself does not have haptics or rumble. I think the idea behind it is that these controllers are primarily going to be used with a phone, and phones today have really good haptics and rumble and also really good audio, and so none of that carries over to the controller itself. Instead, it just kind of goes through the controller instead. The only time that you really notice it is when you're just using it for Bluetooth and you start to feel like, hey, there's no haptics here and I kind of want that. And so there is some value in the fact that this can be your Bluetooth controller as well. You don't have to buy an additional controller, but it does have some compromises. Smaller buttons, the fact that the right analog stick kind of gets in the way of these buttons. And then also, you don't have any rumble or haptics. Another thing to bear in mind is the Bluetooth on this controller will work with more devices than just tablets and phones. So for example, here's my tablet PC running Windows, and this is connected via Bluetooth as well. So for example, if I jump into Emulation Station, I've already got it hooked up, and you can see here that yes, I can navigate through absolutely no problem as well. So it feels very good as a Bluetooth controller that you could use on your PC as well. As a test last night, I actually played about an hour of Clair Obscur Expedition 33 on this controller via Bluetooth as opposed to using the regular controllers that I usually use. I'm about 2/3 of the way into the game, but I'm not going to show any gameplay because I feel like this is a game that you have to go into blind, so I don't want to give any spoilers. But I will say that I played a couple boss battles with this controller and it worked out really well. This is a game where precision controls are very important. You have parries and dodges, and the timing of them is really important. And I found no difference between using this and just another standard Bluetooth controller. The only thing I was missing in that whole experience was that haptic feedback, because that game does use it. And so I wish that I could feel a little bit of rumble when using Bluetooth, but that's about it. So again, I can kind of see the merits of using this as a telescopic controller, but then also a Bluetooth controller if you don't want to have multiple controllers laying around. I think that there are Bluetooth controllers that are much better than this, especially at this price point, but it is nice to have an all-in-one as well. At the end of the day, I could see myself playing through this game with this controller, but I probably would prefer to play something that had rumble instead. It is also worth noting that you cannot use this with a Nintendo Switch, so there's no connection here with the Bluetooth. It just doesn't have the same protocol, so unfortunately you cannot use this as a Switch controller. Honestly, it's probably not a great fit anyway because you wouldn't be able to slide it in, which would be a really neat feature, but that USB-C port is going to get in the way. Instead, you are probably better off using something like this, which is a dedicated Bluetooth controller that does have Switch protocol. In fact, this is what I use on this Switch, is that I actually just keep this controller connected all the time. And so this has become like my Pro Switch right here. And so you can see this one connects via Bluetooth and it basically works as a Pro controller. And so this is my Nintendo Switch setup right here. I was hoping for something similar with the Backbone Pro, but I don't see it. Okay, now let's talk about the software experience. And there is a dedicated Backbone app, and this thing is pretty complicated, both in just the way that it works, but then also public perception of this app, which has changed over the years. And to start, I should say that you don't actually have to use this app at all. You do not have to install it. It's just going to work as a regular telescopic controller. And the app itself kind of functions as a all-in-one hub. So you can see here that I can kind of navigate through my available games. I can go through here also and kind of learn about some other features like their emulator. We'll talk about that later. And then also, you can like shop on Apple Arcade. So the idea here is that this is supposed to be like a game hub where it's integrated with all the different services that you have, and you'll basically just go into Backbone and then play your games from here. Again, none of this stuff is actually required, but if you want something that's more like an all-in-one solution, then this can definitely do that. Now, this can get more complicated because in addition to just the regular functions you have within the app, they have a subscription model as well. It's $40 a year, and they call it Backbone Plus. And the whole Backbone Plus thing has been changed a lot over the years as well. I think a lot of this has to do with community feedback. So nowadays, the Backbone Plus app essentially just gives you additional benefits and content as opposed to locking things behind a paywall. But to be clear, the original Backbone 1 still does have a feature that is locked behind that. And that is essentially the ability to use this as a wired controller. So you could plug this into, say, for example, an iPad and use it like that, but only if you're a subscribing member. All the other main features of this controller, and essentially all of these within this controller as well, are totally free. So this is mostly going to be about stuff like, getting an extended warranty, or you'll get like some rewards points or additional content, stuff like that. There's a couple other benefits like the ability to record your gameplay at 1080p 60 frames per second, but for me personally, I've never really found a draw to have Backbone Plus. But there is a lot of confusion about this service and whether or not you need it in order to use this controller. And you absolutely do not. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to have some bonus extras. So let's talk about what you can find within the software suite on its own. I've already talked about the quick settings menu, so that's going to be up here on the top right. This is where you can change your different controller profiles. So for example, if you wanted to have a specific button layout for a certain type of games, you can make a new profile for that. And so you can swap between them here. I'm just using my own one right now. Another really handy feature I found in this quick menu is the ability to change your devices on the fly. So right now I'm just hooked into my phone, and so that's what's controlling everything. But you can see I've already got it paired to my Asus Flow Z13 and then also my iPad. Now, say I wanted to go immediately into my iPad. Instead of having to disconnect from this phone and then go over and repair with this, all I have to do is just tap on this. It's going to allow me to connect to it right now. And so just like that, I am now controlling my iPad. And so you can see here that this is now my controller. I can take my phone out of here if I would like, but I'm able to pair between the two really quickly. And then if I wanted to get back to my phone, I can just tap on this, disconnect from the device, and now I'm back to actually using this within the phone itself. So I do like the ability to swap between your different consoles at once within the menu, as opposed to going into the OS menu to change out your controls. The app also does a very good job of integrating in with other services. For example, you can connect your Steam as well as your Xbox profiles to the Backbone app. And so what this means is if I want to start up a game right here within the Backbone app, I can actually start up Oblivion. This is going to take me through the Xbox interface to actually launch this in the cloud. And so without having to go into the Xbox app, I'm able to just start up my Xbox game via cloud services because I have Game Pass. Now, another neat feature that you can do with the Backbone Pro is that you can transfer from one instance of Xbox Cloud Gaming to another device with the same controller at the same time, and it's pretty seamless. So right now I'm playing Oblivion on my iPad, and you can see that I have not played this game in like a week, so I haven't actually leveled up. But I am just running this through my browser right now. So let's say I'm playing at home and I decide that, you know what, I'm ready to move on, but I want to keep playing my game. So for example, let's say I'm playing on my tablet in the living room or maybe on my TV, and I decide that I want to now go to bed and I want to use my phone. So at this point, all I would need to do is go into my Backbone app, and then I can, connect my phone to the controller. And so that's going to connect everything up. And so at this point, I'm still controlling the iPad, as you can see, but I have my phone hooked up to the Backbone app. And so now what I want to do is I want to start playing Oblivion on this instead. So all I have to actually do is just click on the Oblivion button. It's going to start up the game, and it's going to close this instance and move it over to here instead. See how it just closed it out? And now you'll see I'll be back in that same pause menu right here on my phone. Now the controller itself is still controlling my iPad, not the phone, so I have to go in and change that out as well. So I have to go in a little menu here, go back to the Backbone section, and now just close this out, so disconnect from the iPad. And so now when I'm back in Oblivion, you can see I'm controlling my character on the phone. And so that's a pretty seamless transition from going from one platform to the other, and it's kind of cool that the Backbone enables that because I can use this both in Bluetooth and USB-C wired. Also within the app, you can go in and start a party with your friends, some of those kind of social integrations. Again, I've never really used those, but they are there for you as well. Now, one last feature I want to talk about is this Backbone Emulator. So this is a new app they've been working on that's kind of rolling out at the same time as the Backbone Pro. And this app is using a backend called Emulator.js that's an open source software that basically allows you to play your emulation games through a browser. And so all they've really done is simplified this process for you. And so the idea here is that you can essentially go into the emulator itself, and then you can add your own ROMs right here. It's kind of like a very pared down version of an emulator core. So what you would do is basically identify where your ROMs are, and it's going to save it into the own Backbone browser. From there, you'll be able to play the games offline, and it also supports save states. But bear in mind that the systems that they support are limited. So you have NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance. They are working to add more cores and whatnot, but this is a very much entry-level feature. So it's not really made for people who are watching this channel, but rather Backbone customers who are interested in trying out emulation but don't know really where to start. And they do have a bunch of homebrew games that they've already added, and so you can actually go through here and test these on your own if you would like as well. And so it's just a neat way to kind of integrate these retro games into the Backbone experience. Again, most emulator fans will probably be using something like RetroArch instead, but it is nice to have this all integrated within here as well. Now for my part, I did test it out, so I uploaded one of my own ROMs, and so you can see here I have Castlevania Aria of Sorrow already set up. And the save states work out pretty well, so when you try to close out of the game, it'll give you the option to either save it or just quit it. And then when you start up the game, it'll just load up your previous save. Now, one thing worth noting is we do not have a lot of emulation features here, so no filters and shaders and stuff like that. In addition, the button mapping is a little bit off because for this game in particular, the A button is the actual A button, the B button is the actual B button. So that means these two are swapped. And so when it comes to the labeling of the buttons, yes, it is correct, but when it comes to the actual position of what it was on the original Game Boy Advance, it is the opposite. So those are the kind of hiccups that you're going to find with a very simple app like this. And again, I don't think this is a feature that most emulation community people are going to be interested in anyway. It's more about an introductory thing for other customers. It is also worth noting that this emulator function is going to be part of that subscription feature as well. And so again, just another reason why I think it might be better just to use RetroArch instead. Okay, I think we've gone through all the things that you can do on the Backbone Pro. So let's start wrapping up, talk about what I like and what I don't like about this controller. Number one, I think it is a very comfortable controller. I really like the fact that this thing is super compact, but I actually have been able to play it for hours on end with no issue. And part of that has to do with the fact that we have these new upgraded controls in just about every single way. In addition to the upgraded ergonomics, everything else feels great. We've got full-size sticks, an excellent D-pad, and quiet face buttons. I also like the amount of connectivity options that we have. We can connect via USB-C direct, but then also Bluetooth for a variety of different systems, including PC as well as tablets. Even if you have something like a smart TV that allows you to use a Bluetooth controller and maybe connect to something like Xbox Game Pass, you can do all of that with this controller as well. And you can also tell that this is a product of care and attention because there are a lot of nice little features to it, including the pass-through or parallel charging. So even though this controller has its own battery, they've figured out a way to basically charge your phone and the controller at the same time, but only when the controller needs it. And I think that type of intelligent charging just really shows how much care and attention to detail they put into this controller. However, I would not consider the Backbone Pro to be a perfect controller, and there are quite a few things that I wish were a little bit better. Number one has to do with the ergonomics of the right analog stick. When it comes to pressing certain face buttons, that stick does get in the way. And so I did find that to be a nuisance, especially when playing retro style games. And so that was unfortunate because I'd love to play this controller with just about everything. It also was a little bit weird to me that a premium controller like this is missing some premium hardware features. I think the most glaring omission is that we have just traditional potentiometer joysticks as opposed to something like Hall Effect or TMR joysticks instead. And I think that for a controller that costs this much, you should have the best of everything, and these sticks are definitely more on the low end side. Additionally, I would love to see some premium features here that justify that price tag, including video out. I think that is a feature that would be really excellent, especially for those who have AR glasses. Another thing that bothered me over the past couple days of testing is that I wish it had Bluetooth haptics or rumble. I love the fact that I can use this as a traditional Bluetooth controller, and it actually works out pretty well, to the point where I could play through a couple games like this. But in this day and age, I also want a little bit of haptic feedback as I'm playing, and that's the one feature that fell short for me. And then, of course, probably the biggest question left after doing all this testing is whether or not this price is really justified. $170 for a retail controller is really high. It makes even Joy-Cons look pretty cheap. And after talking to the company, they are definitely positioning this as a premium controller. Not quite at the point of like an Xbox Elite controller or even the PlayStation DualSense Edge, but more along the lines of something a little bit cheaper. However, I think that the amount of features and refinement in those other controllers is quite a bit better than the Backbone, just because it's trying to do many things at once and not quite nailing it all the time. It's a really excellent telescopic controller with a couple caveats, and it's also a pretty good Bluetooth controller, but feels a little bit stunted compared to other options. And when you add in the potential of a $40 subscription model to get the most out of this controller, it does feel like it is a bit overpriced. Now, thankfully, Backbone has been known over the years to drop their prices during things like Black Friday and whatnot, and so I could see this being like a $120, $130 controller, but for $170, that price is very steep. And so in the end, I think the Backbone Pro is going to be a successful controller. A lot of people bought the Backbone 1, and so I can see them seeing this Backbone Pro and picking it up as like an upgraded version. And it is upgraded. It feels better. The controls are much better. But personally, I don't see this as being my primary recommendation for people who are looking to get a good telescopic controller, just because the entry price is so high. For me, I think this controller is only going to be a very good fit at this price point for somebody who doesn't own any other controllers and they only want to own one and they want to use it for Bluetooth and telescopic things, and so that will actually work. And so instead of using like a telescopic controller with your phone and then also switching over to a Bluetooth controller when you're ready to play on your PC, then yes, I could see that the price point of this basically matching these two combined. And so I think the primary audience of a Backbone Pro will be somebody who wants a phone controller, but also a Bluetooth controller all in one, and they like the idea of a self-contained software ecosystem. But I think that's a lot of ifs for a controller, and especially for something at the $170 price point. I think most people already have a Bluetooth controller laying around, and then also, a telescopic controller can be a lot cheaper. This one is about $80 retail, but you can find it for cheaper often. And so it really comes down to what you are willing to pay for to get a certain experience. So, for example, if you're only looking at telescopic controllers, if you want something that's more compact and smaller, then yes, the Backbone Pro is definitely smaller in that regard. It also has really excellent controls and big size sticks, and so I can see this as being a viable telescopic controller option versus something like the GameSir G8. But the thing is, there's a nearly $100 price difference between the two, and I don't see this controller being $100 better than something like the GameSir G8. Again, it really comes down to use case and whether or not you plan on using the Backbone Pro to its full extent, both from the software and hardware side. In fact, earlier today, when preparing for this video, I actually had to sit down with the CEO of Backbone. And we talked about all this stuff and, where this price point really sits and who is the correct audience for it. And the way that they envision it is that the Backbone Pro is not necessarily just a controller, but more a system, something that you would use to connect all of your varying devices over the years. So the idea would be that, 5-10 years from now, we're not really going to be playing a lot of console games and whatnot. We're probably going to be focused more on playing via the cloud. I mean, at this point, Xbox just raised the prices of all their consoles. Who is going to buy like a $700 Xbox when you can just stream it? Yes, it's not going to be the same experience, but it's a lot cheaper. And so this is where this will come in handy, where you'll have one single controller for all the various platforms on your phone, on your TV, on your iPad. All those things can be used because we have that dual connectivity. And so it almost feels like Backbone is investing into the future of gaming. They think that things are going to go towards the cloud, and you're going to want to have only one controller to do that, and they're hoping that you choose the Backbone Pro. But the way I see it in today's environment, there are many other controller options out there that are going to be a lot cheaper than the Backbone Pro. So there may come a point where this makes a lot more sense, but for me right now, I would generally just recommend finding something for a little bit cheaper, and it'll still give you many of those same functionalities, just maybe not all in one controller. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Is it better to get 2 different controllers for around the same price as a single controller, or would you rather have an all-in-one solution like the Backbone Pro? As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.